What's up, guys, and welcome back to the Spoken Truth podcast. You just heard us talk about the 2024 NBA first rounds of the playoffs. If you want to hear our picks about that, go ahead and listen to the previous episode. Now we're going to jump right into the Golden State Warriors, where just a disappointing showing in the play-in. A lot of us thought that they were going to win that game and be able to fight their way into the playoffs, but that didn't turn out to be the case. A lot of questions surrounding this dynasty. This dynasty has dominated the last 10 years of the NBA, the last decade. They've been in six finals appearances, they've won four championships. But all good things must come to an end. Chaz, is this the end of the Warriors dynasty as we know it?
Yeah, that's hard to say. I mean, I think a lot of that probably goes to if Clay Thompson comes back during free agency this offseason. He's probably going to get a better offer elsewhere. And if he decides to take the money, I don't think anybody would blame him. I think there's a good chance that he's willing to take a discount, though, to stay with the team that drafted him, that he's found all of his success with. Um, I just want to say that I hope it's not the end of the dynasty. I mean, we're talking about in the last decade, like you said, six finals appearances, four championships, one of the best teams in NBA history. I think obviously along with the Spurs are the best dynasty of the turn of the century. They've kind of been the golden standard, of the past decade in the NBA. I don't want to see it come to an end. I want to see Steph Curry, especially, we're talking about a player that has a chance to go down as one of the best ever. And anytime you have a chance to add another championship or add another deep playoff run, I always root for that guy to do it. When we're talking about getting to the end of their career, every playoff run kind of matters at this point. And for them to not even make the playoffs is obviously a disappointment. And then to see Klay Thompson go out the way he did, 0 points on 0 of 10 shooting from the field, over 6 from three. It's just kind of sad to see. We're talking about a Hall of Fame player and one of the best shooters in NBA history, and he's just not the player that he used to be. Some games he's able to kind of rein that in, and then other games he just looks completely out of it. And he was absolutely lost the other night against Sacramento. He couldn't hit anything, and then even towards the end of the game, he just looked kind of out of it. And you can't blame him just because he probably feels like he's taking shots that he's hit millions of times and he just can't anymore. And, he's getting outplayed by good players, but players that he would have destroyed just years ago. I mean, Keegan Murray was arguably the best player on the court. A guy like Keon Ellis was absolutely phenomenal, and he really swung that game in the Kings' favor. And then we're talking about guys like Klay Thompson and Steph Curry, just not really being able to get it going. Even Curry, I thought, kind of struggled. Obviously he still had a pretty good game, but for his expectations, you would have thought that he could have done a little bit more. Um,
Yeah.
I was really hoping that the Warriors would advance and get the eight seed because I wanted to see them go against the Thunder. They've played some of the best games of the season. Obviously, Curry had the game winner in the in-season tournament, and then Chet Holmgren had the game tying triple, and the Thunder won at San Francisco a couple of weeks later. That was a series I was really looking forward to. Instead, the Kings eliminated them. The Warriors season comes to an end with that. I think it was a 24-point loss. I hope it's not the end of the era. Hope it's not the end of the dynasty. It very well could be, though. I think we're gonna have to wait and see what the offseason holds, though.
Yeah, there's so many different elements to touch on with the Golden State Warriors. Um, there's so many moving parts and so many pieces that Wiggins, Chris Paul, Steph, Clay. What are the future of all of those players? Now we know Steph is on the contract for I believe the next 3 to 4 years. Draymond is still on the contract for the next 3 to 4 years. So we know those two at least will be a part of the Golden State Warriors going forward. Chris Paul, we know that that deal in the offseason, was a free agency was a money move to unload cap and unload money off their books. He was owed $30 million. That $30 million is going to come off the books at the turn of the new year, when they can start, in the offseason when they can start actually going out and signing folks. So we know that 30 million is going to come off their books. You have to see what you can get for Wiggins. You have to see if you can move Wiggins in some way or form to bring back pieces that complement your team. Wiggins, his best season by far was in 2022, when the Warriors won the championship. By far the best season he had as a Warrior. He averaged the most points he's ever averaged in the NBA. He had the most assists he's ever averaged in the NBA and rebounds that he's had in the NBA, and he actually had a higher field goal percentage that he's ever had in the league. And so that was the best we've ever seen Andrew Wiggins play. And I always say he is one of the most inconsistent players in the NBA. And so you can't depend on him night after night to give you that consistent effort that he gave you in 2022. And so the Warriors need to see what they can do to get him off the books to bring in because he has a heavy salary. They need to see what they can do to get him off the books and bring back pieces that fit their system. Klay Thompson. Klay Thompson, he's either going to understand his role. Now, Klay Thompson, he wanted upwards of $40 million. Klay Thompson has to know he's not going to get $40 million. He has to know he's not going to get that. He is half of that, maybe 20, maybe 18, 20 range. Klay Thompson has to accept the fact that he is not a starter in the NBA anymore. The same thing Carmelo Anthony had to go through, the same thing Chris Paul had to go through during the season. He's not a starter in the NBA anymore. If he can accept that role, he would be amazing coming off the Warriors bench to help the other players, Jonathan Kuminga, to help those other players, Moses Moody, to help those players grow into the next phase. There's not a batch of superstars that the Warriors have in that group. And to me, in my opinion, I don't think Jonathan Kuminga will be a superstar. I think he could be an all-star, maybe. Moses Moody, Trace Jackson Jr., I believe those are really good complementary pieces on that roster. And so if he can accept that role, I believe he I believe he fits what the Warriors have going forward for the next couple years. It depends on the years that he wants. It depends on how much money he wants. Because he can go to a team and be a starter and get upwards to $40 million. It really depends. A team like the Mavericks can really use him in their starting lineup. A sharpshooter like that, they can use him in our lineup and they could be even more deadlier. So it isn't that he is, comatose, like he's done. I just think the version that we've seen from Klay Thompson for so many years, that's gone.
Mm-hmm.
Steph, the Kings play Steph. I've seen the Kings play Steph the best they've ever played him in the last 3 or 4 years. They stopped the dribble penetration. They stopped the handoff with him and Draymond Green. They stopped all of the cuts, the access to Steph. They doubled him. They had a man on him that was basically playing him, not even looking at the ball, was playing him face to face. And so it was almost as if they was playing this junky style of defense against him, and it worked. We seen the Toronto Raptors do that in NBA Finals where they played the box and one. It wasn't to the degree of the box and one, but you could tell there was someone guarding Steph Curry who really didn't focus on any other thing that they had going on, but that was their main assignment. And that's how you have to guard Steph. And so they couldn't get space. They couldn't get space. A Warrior team that couldn't get space couldn't pass the ball as efficient and effective as the Warriors passed the ball, to not be able to get space, to not get dribble penetration, to not have Draymond set the screens like they normally do. They janked up the Warriors offense the way that the Warriors usually run offense. I did not recognize that team. How they played offense, that team was unrecognizable. And so the reason why Steph struggled was Steph couldn't get any separation. And they learned how to play him. Mike Brown, if anyone can play Steph, it's Mike Brown. He's coached the man for years. And so the Kings did an amazing job. Tip your hats off to him. They guarded Steph amazing that I've ever seen, better than I've ever seen a team guard him other than the Toronto Raptors. And they just outplayed the Golden State Warriors from start to finish. The game seemed out of hand opening tap. To be quite honest with you, the game seemed out of hand the first 5 minutes. And if you are a basketball fan, you could see that game, how it was going to go before the first quarter ended. And so the Golden State Warriors have a lot of questions and have no answers. They need to restructure this roster. I don't know how they do it with the highest payroll in NBA history. Again, they have the highest payroll in NBA history, and they're out the first round. I don't know how you get better. If they bring the same team back, this is not a championship level team. I don't know how you necessarily get better. I don't think you could go out and get a superstar because that just puts you more in a tax. You could go out and get an all-star caliber player that improves your roster, but doesn't put you over the hump. It just the West is getting better, the NBA is getting better. I just don't know what they do to become a championship level team again. And you have Steph Curry, who is still playing at an MVP caliber level, and you cannot waste what he's given you. So I don't know what they do.
Yeah, there are definitely changes to be made. I will say though that obviously Draymond was suspended twice. With him on the court, they were 33 and 22. They wouldn't have been a 10 seed if he was healthy all season.
No, they would not.
And then I think they are going to make some changes. You know, you talk about whether or not you keep Clay or let him walk. And I do agree with you that you probably try and see what you can get for Wiggins. He's a guy that was your second best player during the championship run just 2 years ago. And then now he looks completely out of it at times. I think
Yeah.
you can probably still get some pretty good value for him because he is a talented player that still has upside. But I just think he's not the player that you really want him to be anymore. You can probably slide Kuminga into that role and then try and look for somebody else that maybe can come in and help. You probably move on from Chris Paul, maybe even Kevon Looney, guys that have been there. I'm sorry, Kevon Looney has obviously been there, and a guy like Chris Paul you just brought in this year, but it didn't really pan out. You know, he wasn't the reason that they struggled, but he didn't really add much off the bench either. So I mean, there's a lot of changes to be made. I think you do have a solid young core that you can continue to try and build around with Curry. You know, Kuminga, Moody, Pajemski, and Trace Jackson Davis. Those are all guys that you want in your rotation. I think those are all guys that played pretty well, even in that Kings game. Moody,
Right.
I think 16 off the bench. Kuminga had like 14 or so. Those guys were the reason that they even were in the game at halftime
Yeah.
alongside Curry, obviously. I think you keep those guys on the roster and then see if you can add a couple more guys, and maybe they can be a team that we talk about competing next year.
What boggles my mind about the Golden State Warriors is for the last 10 years, they've won 4 championships. They've done it their way, how they want to play their style of basketball. For the last 3 years, they've won a championship. They won it in 2022, just 2 years ago. The Warriors refused to sign a big man that is over 6'9". You have to sign a big man that is over 6'9".
It's like drafting James Wiseman scared them.
It's like they're allergic to big man. Is they're allergic to him? Like you have to sign a big man. You have to get someone that can compete with AD. You have to get someone that can compete with Jokic. You have to get somebody that can compete with Giannis. You have to get somebody that can compete with Embiid. You have to get a big man on this roster. I don't know why they keep thinking the small ball that they've used to win championship. It's not working anymore. It's not working. I don't know who I need to tell. I don't know who needs to hear this. The small ball that you're running, the shit that you're running the last 2 years is not working. Get a big man,
Yeah,
preferably somebody over 6'10".
I mean,
Yeah,
Jackson Davis was pretty good, and it seemed like Kerr was kind of scared to play him against even a guy like Sabonis.
he
For
didn't want he you could tell he was kind of nervous.
yeah,
Trace Jacks was kind of nervous. He pulled him about 6 minutes in the first quarter.
he didn't come
He
back
didn't see he didn't come back. He didn't
until
come back.
I think, right?
Until it was almost out of hand, almost, it seemed like. And
And
so,
Looney really wasn't giving you much.
no, it's more so Steve Kerr. Steve Kerr is an amazing coach. Take nothing away from that man. But the last 2 years, I've questioned his coaching abilities more than I've ever questioned them. To be quite honest with you. And then is now this man is about to lead the U.S. Olympic team. Please, please. I mean, you have a pool of megastars that are about to accompany you. You have 3 of them that are about to accompany you. Please don't be the reason we lose. I know we're not going to lose because we are so overwhelmingly have the best team in the world, the best players in the world. But Steve Kerr, don't be the reason we lose this Olympics. I mean, last year, when the last time the U.S. lost three or 4 games in Olympic play? That's unheard of. Steve Kerr, I don't know what the fuck he needs to do, and I'm cussing. I don't know what he needs to do. But he needs to change the way he approaches coaching because it isn't working anymore. That small ball is not working anymore. Sorry, I have to be the one to break it to you, Steve. It ain't working anymore. Nah.
I will say, as as down as it feels like we are on the Warriors right now, I think all it takes is maybe one or two moves during the offseason and maybe hit on a draft pick. They hit on two last year with Podziemski and Jackson Davis, guys that came in right away and could contribute to the rotation. You add one more guy through the draft, and then you either trade or allow Clay to walk and then make one more move. And I think we are talking about a team that is probably a top 6 seed in the West next year, as
Can they
long
do a sign and trade with Klay Thompson?
I think that's probably in the option. I think right now everything's on the table, don't you?
I think so.
I
I
think
believe if they could do a
you look
sign
at
and
it,
trade with Klay Thompson and get some pieces back, I think that'd be a good move for them. I It's just that you're getting rid of the big. What do you consider the dynasty? Is the dynasty the three of them or is it Steph? As long as you have
I'm gonna
Steph, is still
say,
considered the dynasty.
oh, you mean is the dynasty over if Clay isn't there anymore?
Yeah, is it considered the big three? Is they considered the dynasty, or is it Steph the main piece of the dynasty?
I kind of think of usually the core being the dynasty.
Okay.
But if Clay moves on and Curry brings them to, contending again, then we're still going to kind of count this as the Warriors dynasty. It would just kind
Or
of
dynasty.
it would be like a new light, I would say. Um, but before we move on, I want to ask two more questions. First, is did Clay play his last game as a Warrior, in your opinion?
That's tough.
I say no. I think they bring him out, bring him back on a discount, and they give it another go. And he probably comes off the bench next season, but he's willing to take a little bit more money to at least stay with the team.
I say no too. I say no on a short-term deal. I'm talking 1 to 2 years. I think he takes a pay cut. I think he takes a different role. I think he comes off the bench. But I also see a scenario where he's no longer a Warrior. And so if you have me choose, I will say he's coming back on a discount and he's coming off the bench. But I do see a scenario where he's no longer on the team next year.
Yeah, I definitely can see it going both ways. And I think that they need to look at everything that's on the table and
Yeah.
make the best move that's available for the team. I mean, right now, like I said earlier, you have to try and get the most out of Curry's final few years that you can. And if that means
Yeah.
moving on from Clay, you might have to make a hard decision. With that being said, do you think this team ever gets back to, I'll say the Western Conference Finals? We don't have to say, do they win a title? Do they get to the finals? Let's say with Curry on the roster, do they get back to the Western Conference Finals?
With Steph, you always have a chance. You always have a chance with Steph. It's going to be tough because the West it gets better and better every year. You have to look at it from a hindsight of last year. Last year, the Warriors had a better record this year than they did last year, and it ended up being a 10th seed.
Right.
Compare that to the Eastern Conference. If the Warriors took that same record, they copy and pasted and moved it over to the East, the Warriors would be a top 8 seed. The West is loaded. And so I do think he gets back to a conference finals. I do believe he wins another championship. How does that look? When does that happen? I think it happens in the next 4 or 5 years. I think he still has that much time left. But eh, this is me being optimistic on the ability that Steph Curry still possesses. Now, if Steph Curry falls off a wagon or he starts to decline, we haven't seen any significant decline in Steph. He's still, him and LeBron are still they're down. You could tell they're on a downward slope, but they're so great that their downward slope is so slow, it's so steep that it doesn't it we, they masquerade the decline. So if he can continue doing that on that trajectory for the next 3 or 4 years, I could see him reaching another conference finals and potentially winning another championship. Another championship for Steph does so much for him. That moves him in the conversation of top five, top six. Where do you put him at? Now, are you taking Steph or Kobe? Are you taking Steph Duncan? Are you taking Steph Shaq? Like that moves him into those conversations of those pantheon of great players. I do think he gets another one, but I'll still, again, like I answered the last one, I won't be surprised if he won. I won't be surprised if he never wins again.
Mhm.
And so that's the honest truth.